Welcome to the Turnpike Sports Spotlight. Dave Weishuttle with you. I'm excited to talk to our next guest because he was involved in writing one of the best books that I've read in a long time. The name of the book is Gambler, Secrets from a Life at Risk, which is the story of legendary gambler Billy Walters. And Armen Keteyian did a masterful job of bringing the story of Billy to the public. And we are lucky and thrilled to have multiple Emmy Award-winning journalist Armen Keteyian on the line. Armen, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure, Dave.
First off, congratulations. Absolutely an amazing book. I told you off air, I think I read it in a day and a half. It was so interesting, I couldn't put it down. If you're a professional sports bettor or you're a sports book operator or if you're in the business in sports betting, you've certainly heard the name Billy Walters. I'm curious, as a journalist, when did you first hear the name Billy Walters?
Well, that's a funny story. So in the mid-'80s, the specific date would be March of 1986. I was at Sports Illustrated as a writer-reporter. They're pretty much their top investigative reporter. And the magazine did a special section, 32 pages, special report on gambling in America. And one of the stories that was part of that section was the first national story on the computer group. And I did a lot of reporting on the computer group on a story that was written by Robert Boyle. And because I'm a little weird in certain ways with obsessiveness, I still have that file, that computer group file. So Billy's name was not in the story, but Billy's name was all over the reporting in the story because he was moving all the money for the computer group. And when they did all the search warrants relative to the computer group case, the FBI, Billy's name was literally almost on every single search warrant. So when I was approached to do this book in June of 2020, the first thing the person, Glenn Bunting, who represents Bill in strategic communications and PR, he said, "Do you know Billy Walters?" And I'm like, "The computer group Billy Walters?" Yeah, that's who Billy Walters is. So that was my first, the second iteration of the first time I ran across Bill. And, June of 2020 turned into a couple of months of Bill and I talking. I wrote a couple sample chapters that he really liked. And so we came to an agreement in September of 2020 that, I would collaborate with him on the book. And honestly, Dave, I thought in my head it would take about a year and a half to write the book. Pretty early on, I realized that was underestimating the scope and the depth of Billy's life. And so what was a one-year project or 18 turned into a 3-year project. And honestly, I don't think the way Billy is as far as his obsessiveness with detail and wanting to get things right, I think 3 years was probably the right number.
It's an absolutely fascinating life. Again, the book is called Gambler, Secrets from a Life at Risk, and it chronicles the life of Billy Walters, who really had a pretty difficult upbringing. Basically, the structure in his early life came from his grandmother. Tell us about his upbringing in Kentucky.
Well, it's really, I think, to me, probably the most amazing part of a amazing life. I mean, if you think about Bill's life, it's really 3 or 4 or 5 different lives strung together. The first one, he's born into rural poverty in Mumfordville, Kentucky. His dad dies when he's 18 months old. He doesn't really ever know his father. His mom, who is about 14 years younger than his father, immediately kind of hightails it north to Louisville, leaving 3 children in the hands of relatives. Billy, by the grace of God, gets left into the hands of his grandmother, who is the most, I would say, seminal influence in Bill's life, certainly when it comes to discipline and respect for others and doing the right thing. By the time he's 7 or 8 years old, he's mowing lawns. He has a paper route. He's shining shoes. And the part that you just can't make up, his Uncle Harry owns a pool hall, the Q&R pool hall in Mumfordville. And Uncle Harry becomes the de facto babysitter when grandmother is working her 2 jobs that she's working. So by the time Billy's 4 years old, he's in the back corner of the pool room, standing on Coke boxes, and got a pool cue in his hand. And by the time he's 10 years old, he's known as the Kid. He's a pool hustler, and a very good 9-ball player. But that's just like the beginning of the first part of his life. By the time he's 17, the first girl he ever dates in high school gets pregnant. Billy's a junior in high school when he's married with a child at 17 years old. He barely scrapes through. And then by 19, he's the best used car salesman in the state of Kentucky. At 19 years old, he's making $56,000 a year, which is the equivalent of about $500,000 in today's dollars. But he's burning through every last dollar of it, gambling, staying out, chasing around, not with women, but just with his buddies, gambling on anything that moves. And then just to kind of fill out that first part of his life, by the time he's 23 years old, he's been married twice and he has 3 kids. So that's generally, in my mind, you could write a book just about that first part of Billy's life.
Oh, no, it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And the fact that he survived that, the first part of the Horatio Alger story, and didn't just become a total loser and a degenerate, to me is amazing. And it has so much to do with Bill's fortitude and his discipline, now, not so much then. But I think Billy always wanted to be great at something. What that was going to be, I don't think he was very certain about it at certain times of his life. But, when I was writing that section, that part of the book, it was just so enjoyable because it's literally like something out of a movie. You're trying to, like, really? This is true? And trust me, I talked to a lot of people beyond Bill. In fact, I think I did 60 different interviews independent of the hundreds of hours I spent talking to Bill, thousands of hours, just to confirm the scenes and the settings and the stories, because some of them you're like, Bill, that can't be true. And then sure enough, it was true.
What was amazing to me is how driven he was. I mean, he was making money in the pool rooms. I think he placed his first sports bet at 9 years old on the Yankees and the Dodgers World Series. But, he was working several jobs to get the money he was betting with. For me, I thought he was a very intelligent person who was just incredible at absorbing information around him. What did you see as the characteristic that made him not only a successful gambler, but also a successful businessman?
Well, I think that's very astute. I think he's absolutely driven. And I think, if you drilled down and said what was behind all that, I think losing your father when you're 18 months old and never really getting to know him at all, I think Bill in his own way was trying to prove to his father that he was a success. And that even though his father would never know a single thing about that, when Billy could look when he would stand on his grandmother's porch and look out over to the Mumfordville Cemetery, which was right across the street. And I actually was there when we took a tour of his hometown in Louisville together. I think he was talking to his father in a lot of ways. I'm going to prove to you that I'm better than what other people might think of me. So there's that. And then the other side of the equation is Billy absorbs information, whether it's in sports betting or whether it was in the stock market or whether it was making a business deal. He would never go into a meeting. He would rarely, if ever, make a bet. Early on, he made some major mistakes in the stock world in investing, but now he absorbs information and can process information like a computer. And he's very disciplined. But he's also a zero-sum game kind of a businessman. He is going to have answers to every single question that a potential partner is going to have or a potential acquisition that he wants to make. You don't own or co-own 22 car dealerships
sure,
and 13 golf courses in addition to doing the kind of sports gambling that he was doing from the beginning of the college football season through the probably the Final Four, some years betting year round, 365 days a year. But I think you're right, Dave. I think his processing capabilities, but Billy's also, he likes to win, and he's willing to put in the time and the effort and has tremendous discipline now that when you add all that up, I think you have a tremendous advantage in the world of, whether it's in the world of sports betting, stock market investing, or business. And there's not a lot of guesswork with Bill Walters. And trust me, when you spend 3 years with him, I mean, I did the math one day, and I figured I spent north of 7,000 hours working on the book. And I can tell you, I had co-written 3 other autobiographies of Mike Singletary and Catfish Hunter and George Lopez, the actor, comedian. And Bill spent more time on the book than those 3 men combined. And that's not to say that they were blowing off their part of the equation. It's just to say that Bill was obsessive, and he must have read various versions of the manuscript at least 20 different times. And I know on 2 occasions, and probably more, he went over the manuscript line by line, word by word, at least twice. And I've never, from the co-author perspective, I never had anybody that was that detailed and that concerned about getting everything absolutely right.
One of his big successes came in the late 70s and early 80s in Louisville when he set up shop as a bookmaker. And unfortunately, that got the attention of the officials, and he was indicted because of that activity. Tell us what happened in his time as a bookmaker in Louisville.
Well, it's interesting. Bill had, I think for the most part of his teens and into his 20s, he was as big a bettor as there was in Louisville, which is as you might imagine, that's not a small pool of people that like to gamble in that town. I mean, Bill would bet on anything. Horses, he could be flipping nickels against the bathroom wall for $100, a flip. So, he saw opportunity. He saw a lot of the guys that would come Monday morning looking for the envelope from Bill Walters in their Cadillacs going, wait a second here. They're getting both sides of the action. I'm on the losing side most of the time. Maybe I can do better. Maybe I can give better odds. Maybe I can stay open longer. Maybe I can have better customer service. Maybe if you bet the entire card, it's $1.05 instead of $1.10. And he, at the same time, there was a mayor who was cracking down on all the illegal gambling, and that was one of the pillars of his campaign. And Billy's not in Louisville proper. He's in another county thinking he's safe. Well, he's not. The state police and the cops bust in, and Billy gets busted. And he had the good fortune, if there is such good fortune, of hiring the best criminal defense attorney in the certainly in Louisville and probably the state of Kentucky, a guy by the name of Frank Keteyian Jr. And Billy by that time had burned out in the car business. He went from selling used cars to going to a bigger lot to becoming an independent wholesaler, where he would go up to the auctions in the neighboring states, primarily Indianapolis, and buy 20 cars at a pop, and was over-leveraged and was playing the floating title game. It just wore him out. And so he got out of that, and he opened a bar, and then from the bar, there was the betting on the Super Bowl and other things. And the next thing you know, he's a bookmaker. But, Frank Keteyian told him, he said, Billy, you got 2 options here. You can either get out of the bookmaking business or you can get out of town. And, Billy, this to me is one of the you gotta, it's hard to believe. You know, Billy's he's addicted to gambling. He's got an alcohol problem. Well, where's the one place that a person who's got vices?
When I read that, that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, wow.
He goes to Vegas.
Uh-huh.
But it's the only place. Nevada's obviously the only place in the union that at the time that sports gambling was legal.
Mm-hmm.
But as we say in the book, you know, that's a place that eats, you know, addicts for lunch and dreams for dinner. But Billy, to his credit, with Susan, thank God,
mm-hmm.
you know, his wife now of 47 years, who is a saint, with a capital S. They decide to go to Vegas, and to me, it's like, well, there's another chapter of Billy's life that opens up. And as you well know, Dave, Vegas in the early 80s, a little different than it is today, for sure.
Well, that was my question. I mean, what effect did living and moving to Las Vegas have on him? He certainly met some of the best poker and golf buddies anyone could ever find. So what effect did Vegas have on Billy?
Well, I think it was the biggest thing that ever happened to Billy. It was a crazy. I mean, before he left, when he was 32 years old, back in Louisville, I think it was 4 of his friends got together, and they actually had an over/under on whether Billy would live till he was 35 years old.
Wow!
And it was, I think it was $5,000 a man.
Wow! And
nobody took the over. I mean, everybody took the under. Nobody thought Billy was going to live past his mid-30s. Well, 36, he goes to Vegas, and he had been laying money off for the computer group in Louisville because he had the guy, he was laying off money from his own bookmaking operation in Pittsburgh,
mm-hmm.
and the Pittsburgh guy was laying off money for the computer group. For those that don't know what the computer group was, your audience I'm sure does, you know, it was the first syndicated sports betting operation that used, you know, computer data and computer algorithms to go up against the book. Mm-hmm. And for about, I would say, a 5 or 6 or 7 year period, they just absolutely crushed the books. They were winning 60% of as much as 60% of their games and betting millions every week. So Billy eventually became the biggest layoff guy for the computer group. So when he came to Vegas, the computer group was up and running, started by Michael Kent, and then he became really a pivotal focal point of that operation. But at the same time, I mean, he's carrying around all these addictions with him.
Yeah.
And it takes Bill about 7 or 8 years before he has this pivotal moment, a moment of crisis, where he stops drinking and he stays out of the casinos. And that was another life for Bill. But as you said, Doyle Brunson, Chip Reese, Dewey Tomko, Stewie Unger, Sarge Ferris, Jack Binion. That's just the rounders that he was hanging out with. And at the same time, you know, he's learning how to really be a really good poker player and Texas Hold'em player. But he's also learning from Chip Reese money management. And that was a absolutely pivotal moment in Bill's life, because Chip was the best money manager I think Bill has ever seen, rest his soul. And again, these sort of opportunistic times or moments where Bill gets touched on the shoulder by some higher power, but he's smart enough to learn from it. And his relationship with Chip really, I think, is at the heart of Billy's betting system now. Mm-hmm. In so many ways, about when you're talking about, discipline is critical. His formula is not to bet, if his bankroll is, I'm just going to throw a number out, 10,000, he never would bet more than one to 3% of his bankroll. So he'd never bet more than $300 on a single game. And I think that as we were working on those chapters, you really understand that discipline is part of Billy's DNA, whether it's in business or investing or certainly in sports betting. But that Vegas world, I mean, for those that have seen the movie Casino, Joe Pesci played a character that was based on Tony Spilotro, who was just a villainous, who took great joy in using industrial tools, blowtorches and wrenches and vices and things like that to get his way. And he was a reign of terror in Vegas. You know, at the same time, you got Lefty Rosenthal there, and the town is kind of blowing up, and it's being taken over by organized crime from Chicago, the outfit, and Billy's in the middle of that in a lot of different ways. So the fact that he survived that period of his life is another one of those hard-to-believe stories.
What fascinated me about his move to Vegas was his involvement with the computer group, like you were talking about. I mean, sports bettors nowadays always talk about the algorithms or computer programs they use. And for me, modern sports betting seemed to stem from the computer group and the computer program written by Mike Kent, who actually wrote the computer program because of a softball game, which was absolutely amazing to me. But because of the computer group, Billy was indicted again because of his involvement with the group. And it's amazing, speaking as a lawyer myself, how wrong the government understood the law in this situation. What was the government's case against Billy, and how did Billy defend himself during this case?
Well, I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, that's a whole nother, it is literally a chapter or two in the book.
Yeah, it is.
And I think the government never believed that you could make money betting sports. They always felt that you had to be booking as well to come up with the money that you would use to gamble. And it was an FBI agent who just, Thomas Noble, how's that for a last name?
What an ironic last name.
What an ironic last name. And Thomas Noble didn't know diddle-do about really how sports gambling in America worked. He heard a couple things, saw a couple things, put 2 and 2 together and got 5, and figured that, I've stumbled upon a massive sports betting operation controlled by organized crime. So first of all, he didn't understand that they were making bets, not taking bets. And that was really at the heart of the case, is that the government believed that this nationwide sports betting syndicate, not bookmaking syndicate, was making millions of dollars illegally, and they were controlled by organized crime. And they raided all of these people's homes in 1985. It wasn't until 2 weeks before the statute of limitations was going to expire in 1990 that the government indicted all these people. I think at the time it was 18 people, including Billy and Susan Walters, on the belief that they were committing massive crimes. Well, it was about as big a swing and a miss as I think the government has taken in a case in which untold amounts of money was spent and untold amounts of time was spent by FBI agents around the country. When the case finally went to trial in 1992, Billy had some incredibly good lawyers, and Thomas Noble was completely undressed on the stand in terms of what he knew or didn't know about really sports gambling, laying off money, the operation of the group. I think it was a 120-count indictment. 50-something of them were not guilty. 60-something were not guilty. Another 50-something, the government declined after just being crushed by the jury, declined to prosecute. So But what's interesting about that, Dave, and as you know, having read the book, that put a target on Billy's back.
Yeah.
And, you know, because he was Michael Kent wasn't indicted because he cooperated with the government and testified and said, hey, we're making bets, not taking bets.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, you know, Billy became kind of the high profile person on that case.
Yeah.
And from then on, you know, not just federally, but in the state of Nevada with attorney generals and local prosecutors who were trying to make a name for themselves. You know, you take down Billy Walters, that's a big feather in your cap.
Yeah.
And, you know, Billy, time and time again, the man's been indicted 6 times in his life, and we'll get to the one that really sticks in Billy's craw for reasons that to me are just what the government did in order to set the trap and to publicize the indictment and then take Billy to trial is really, I wouldn't wish that on any American.
No.
So, but you know, the computer group today is still, I mean, you guys are much more into that world. I spent, you know, enough time in it, and I should give credit where credit is due, and I will. Dave Satterfield, who is another very, very talented writer, was the former business editor of the Miami Herald and the managing editor of the San Jose Mercury News. I wrote the templates for those betting chapters and helped, but Dave was really the guy that was day to day with Billy and working with the Brain Trust and all the charts and the graphs and things you see in those 2 chapters are, you know, that was a group effort.
Yeah.
And Dave Satterfield had he had a big hand in it. And because I was up to my ears in the other, you know, 26 chapters.
I got to tell you, what was astounding that I found incredible was how Billy compiled information on what he was betting on during the time when the internet wasn't there for him to use. I mean, he was collecting newspapers left from tourists to gather information on teams from around the country since, again, that was a time before the internet. I mean, information wasn't at your fingertips, and I found that incredibly compelling, how he did his magic getting old newspapers. What people thought were garbage, he turned into gold.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
I should have used that line in the
There
book. It's, you know, to go out to McCarran and to find the guy that's supervising the cleaning of planes that are coming in all day long from all over the country, and he would have the crews that would come on the planes. They would collect the newspapers, the sports sections, and they would pass them to the people that would go to the airport on behalf of Billy several times a day. But you think about that, the sports sections in those days were loaded with information.
Yeah.
And stories about the teams and the coaches and the morale and all of that stuff. And you're absolutely right. At a time when, you know, people like Bob Martin and some of, you know, Scotty Shetler, they were making lines, writing things down on a piece of paper. Billy's grabbing all this information, but he's also got people. I mean, at one point in time, he had, I think we wrote 1,600, but I've listened to some interviews that Billy did. He said it was 1,750 different places where he could get a bet down. And, you know, people speaking through voice changers, hiring people in Ireland to bet for him. He went to such extraordinary, incredible extremes to camouflage who was actually behind the bet in that cat and mouse game with the bookmakers. To me, that's another astonishing part of it. It's just an incredible life. And, you know, I think one thing I want to make a point too, if you don't mind, is, you know, kind of the last thing I wanted to do at this point in my life was to write another just pure sports book. And I think, as you said, Dave, and I really appreciate those words, is, you know, this is a great book, a fascinating book about a one-of-a-kind life, and a man who sees things differently, who acts differently. This rags to riches story it's also, as Billy said, he wrote it to try to inspire other people to look at their lives and say, you know what, if Billy Walters could do that, or if he could rise out of those ashes, maybe I can do something here too. So what I've really liked in the reviews that have been on Amazon and other places is that the book resonates far beyond the world of sports.
Yeah.
Yes, his secrets are in there, it's sports gambling, and yes, there's a lot of funny stories about gambling and golfing for unreal amounts of money. Mm-hmm. But the heartbeat of the book is really a story of a man who's lived this one-of-a-kind life. And in the end, I think a pretty inspiring life, who has done more things for more people quietly and anonymously to help others. We all know people that have more money than they know what to do with, but they're very protective of it or cheap about it. Mm-hmm. Billy has given away millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars from Opportunity Village on down to help other people, little people that otherwise wouldn't have been able to pay for a funeral or to pay for unexpected healthcare expenses and stuff like that. That's what, to me, that's the Billy Walters I really like, and I care deeply about him because he's just that one of a kind kind of a person when it comes to things like that.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't know how much he has given back through, like you said, Opportunity Village and Hope for Prisoners. I mean, it seems like a side of Billy Walters that no one knows about.
I totally agree with you. I mean, look, Billy's not a saint. Susan's a saint, as I said. Billy, not so much in certain ways. I mean, he can be a cutthroat businessman, and he's very opinionated, and it's his way or the highway. And there were times, I would literally be banging my head against right in front of him. I'm like, Bill, we can't put another name in the book. We can't. I don't need the backstory here, Armen. I want to tell you the backstory, and then, but at the same time, I've seen him do things for people, and I think what really kind of grabbed my heartstrings was I read all the letters that were written to the Judge Castell, before Billy was sentenced on the insider trading case in New York. It was at least 100 letters. And yes, everybody from, Senator Reid to Peter Jacobson to David Faraday, they all wrote letters, but the ones that really touched me were the ones that were written by employees that had worked for Billy for 20-something years, a bartender at one of his golf courses, or somebody who was a sales manager at one of his automobile dealerships, and what Billy had done for them anonymously, quietly, to help get them out of a terrible situation, that's the Billy Walters that I was like, okay, that's the guy that you have to feel that guy in this book.
Yeah.
And I think that's, to Bill's credit and to the credit of the editor and, the amount of work I put into it, you feel that. And that's the Bill Walters that I hope in the end, when people finish the book, they go, wow, that's a unique individual.
Well, the one thing that the general public became aware of Billy Walters was because of his relationship with Phil Mickelson. What was Billy's relationship with Phil? Certainly, Billy was an incredible golfer. He was involved in golf courses and golf course development. He played in some pro-am events. What is the relationship between Phil and Billy? And I know they were betting together as well.
Oh, yeah. Well, I would say it's another one of the heartbeats of the book, I think, and it certainly made a lot of headlines when the book first came out. But I think Billy saw in Phil a lot of himself in Billy's wilder days in terms of gambling and in Phil's own now very public self-admitted addiction to sports gambling. But they first met in 2006 at the AT&T, where Phil was playing and Billy was a partner with Fred Frederick Jakobsen, and it was the final round of and both Phil and Frederick didn't play well that day, but Billy said all they did was, he and Phil, was talk about sports and sports gambling, and then they met again 2 years later at what was then the Wachovia, now the Wells Fargo in Charlotte, in the locker room, and Phil said to Bill, "Hey, I hear you do partnerships." And by then, Billy was up and running in a big way with his own sports gambling operation. And he said, "Well, yes, I do. As long as, you can bring a bank account to it and you have places to bet at either I don't bet at or at limits that I can't get." And Phil had both. So that began a 5-year betting partnership where Billy made all the bets and they split the wins and losses. Phil put up half the money, Billy put half the money up. No different than Billy had with dozens of other people. It just was Phil Mickelson. And then, Phil would bet outside the partnership, and Billy would make those bets, not take those bets, make those bets on behalf of Phil, because he could either A, he was neutral on the game, or B, he could use those bets to cover up some of the stuff that he was doing in his own operation. So that went on for 5 years. When Billy got indicted, and the news broke in 2016, that was the beginning of the end of their betting partnership.
Yeah.
And where the relationship really fractures, and I won't go into it in chapter and verse, but it's in the book. It really fractures when Billy believes, and Phil had expressed to others, that he would testify on Bill's behalf in the Southern District of New York, that Billy had never provided him any kind of inside information on a stock, Dean Foods stock, or anything else, in order for for Phil to make money and pay off gambling debts to Bill. It was just a complete fallacy that was created by the Southern District of New York, and Phil allowed it to happen because he was caught up in a money laundering investigation involving bets outside his partnership with Bill. And it was complicated, but it's all documented in court cases as we outline in the book. Billy Walters is a lot of things, but when you give your word to Billy Walters that you're going to do something and you don't do it, well, that's the beginning of the end of a friendship. And Billy has been very vocal in the interviews that he's done that he firmly believes that Phil had testified on his behalf in the Southern District of New York in front of the jury, that he would have walked away a free man on the 10 counts of insider trading that he was charged with, open to debate, but not to Bill Walters. And that was the end of it. And also some of the things that Phil had said publicly after Billy was indicted, and I had the exact transcript from the press conference that he held at the memorial in June 1st, 2016, where he basically throws Billy under the bus, saying, I have to be more careful about people I associate with, like, it was Billy's fault, not Phil's fault. And pretty toxic, right now. And,
let me ask you about that case, because I was shocked to find out. I mean, it's a case where the government actually did some underhanded things and leaked grand jury testimony during the case. I mean, activity that they actually admitted to, and I'm shocked the judge let that go forward. But was it the reason why Mickelson didn't put out a public statement or testify to help Billy, was it because of the money laundering investigation that Mickelson was a part of at that time?
No question. He was caught between a rock and a hard place. He took the fifth. They let him skate they let him walk on the money laundering investigation. And one of the people that he wired $2.75 million to pay off an offshore bet at Chris, was charged with money laundering and actually was sentenced to a year and a day in prison and spent time in prison. Phil was never charged in that case, which is a little hard to believe.
Yeah.
But he also hired Greg Craig, who was President Obama's chief White House counsel. So think about the kind of juice that Greg Craig had with the SEC, the Justice Department, the Southern District of New York. And so Phil was able to negotiate, to his credit, negotiate the deal where he purposely would not testify in Billy's trial in exchange for being given a pass on the money laundering investigation. That's just the facts. But as you alluded to, and I have all the documents, including the ex parte letter, the 12-page ex parte letter that Preet Bharara wrote to the judge, Castell, admitting the incontrovertible fact that a senior supervisory FBI agent in the New York office, the FBI office, a guy by the name of David Chavez, repeatedly, criminally leaked secret grand jury testimony to reporters from the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times in order to construct a series of stories that ran in both the Journal and the Times that implicated Bill, Phil Mickelson, and Carl Icahn in a potentially illegal insider trading case involving Clorox, which turned out to be complete BS. But they had Billy in their sights, and as I said, when you get into the sights of the Southern District of New York, the sovereign district of New York, and the sights of Preet Bharara, the most powerful U.S. attorney in the country, without question, you are fighting. And I don't think Bill really understood just how big of a target he had on his back. And as we, outline in those chapters in the book, I don't think Bill got the best representation from his attorneys. He had a white shoe attorney who had a very big time reputation, but in my mind, and I've seen it time and time again from my work, at CBS News and Real Sports, you want a street fighter. You don't want a white collar, white shoe attorney in there. And I read the opening statement and the closing argument by this attorney, and they were, I almost at times I was like, I can't believe I'm reading this. I can't believe how bad this is. And how never did the real Bill Walters ever come to life in that trial. And Bill will admit today the biggest mistake he ever made was not testifying on his own behalf. But, Dave, think about it. You're 71 years old. You're convicted on 10 counts of insider trading. You're a multi-millionaire, hundreds of millions of dollars, but you're going to prison. And you're going to go, they think it's a, federal prison camp Pensacola, that it's some club fed. It's anything but a club fed. Now, it's not, it's not Marion, but it's not a country club. And at 71, to me, that was the most interesting part of the book to write, because I'm just thinking in my own mind, I'm 70 years old. I mean, tomorrow I could be, handcuffed and walking through a gate to spend the next 31 months of my life behind bars for a man who, had his own private plane, had people doing things for him all day long. If he said, jump, they went, how high, Mr. Walters? And now all of a sudden you're behind bars. To me, that's the fact that he came out of that, and the relationships that he formed there, and what he does now, as you mentioned, for Hope for Prisoners, putting money, helping rehabilitate people that lives have been upended and changed and destroyed behind bars. I mean, I'm like, it's hard to believe, honestly, that somebody would think about that instead of being bitter and wanting to do whatever they can to just get as far away possible from a prison life. No, this is a man who's helped people. He's changed people's lives in prison that he met. So, I don't want to get on the, on the soapbox, but that's pretty amazing as far as I'm concerned.
What is his feelings toward Phil Mickelson? I mean, it seems like Phil could have made this all go away with just one statement or one press release. I mean, last year I interviewed Alan Shipnuck about his great book about Phil Mickelson, and I can remember saying it's a great book, but wait till Billy Walters comes out with his book. I mean, what is Billy's feeling toward Phil now? There's hard feelings?
Does
he just
the time of day if he asks for it? I mean, there's a scene in the book, and you've read it, so you know it's at the end where they meet on the range. I mean, Billy lives at the same place that, same golf course that Phil does. I mean, they're in Rancho Santa Fe, California. They're both members of Rancho Santa Fe Country Club, and they met on the practice tee, the practice range, 5 years after Billy had been had gone into prison, and Phil had never reached out, never a letter, never a call, never a nothing. And he tried to say, I'm really sorry. This is what, and Billy just stopped. He said, cut the bullshit. I know exactly what you did, why you did it. There's no shortage of people that have certain amount of feelings towards Billy Walters and vice versa. Billy's very opinionated about his feelings about certain individuals. I think on the I never want to speak to him again the rest of my life list, Phil would be at the top of that list. That's how disappointed and deeply hurt and angry that Bill is about Phil's reluctance to stand up for Bill when he needed it the most. Literally his life was on the line. And, Phil being Phil, who did he think of first? He thought of Phil.
Yeah.
And I'm not the first person to ever say that, as you know, having talked to Alan. I love that book, and Alan and I talked considerably, both on the record and off the record as he was writing it. And, I've seen Phil in action. I've seen him at Torrey, where he and Ricky Fowler were the only tour players that just stood and signed for 45 minutes after, their practice round. And he is a man of the people, but I think it's pretty clear now from some of the words that have come out of Phil's mouth that he's lived a very complicated life. And I think, to Bill's credit, because we had many discussions about this, and it honestly changed right up until the end. How deep do you want to go? How personal do you want to get? How much of what we know and is totally documented do we want to put in the book? And I think, to Bill's credit, there's enough there to know that Phil was a absolutely addicted, unbelievable amounts of money that he spent gambling.
Yeah.
But steered clear of the other stuff. And I think, to Bill's credit, that says a lot about Bill.
I got to tell you, after reading your book, you alluded to this before, I have become a huge fan of Billy's wife, Susan. I can't think of a more understanding spouse. You have a story where Billy came home one night and he lost $1 million, and people don't try that at home, but she's amazing and supportive and always there for him. Tell us about Susan, and what does she mean for Billy's life?
Oh, I think she's the North Star for Billy. I don't think Billy Walters would be anywhere near the man he is today, the multimillionaire he is today, the philanthropist that he is today, if it wasn't for Susan. It's so funny, her last name was Humphreys, her maiden name, and the first person that Billy ever played golf with, and that's a hysterical story, was Johnny Humphreys, and they're playing at Bobby Nichols' course, 9-hole course in Louisville, and Billy shows up. He doesn't know boo-hoo about golf. He shows up with no clubs, no shoes, no nothing, and Johnny goes, like, Billy, where's your clubs? He goes, clubs? What do you mean clubs? They need clubs? So they had to go in and get, rentals and all that stuff. And then, Billy's like, well, what are we playing for? And Johnny goes, Billy, you've never even swung a club in your life. We're playing for, we're not going to play for money. He goes, if we're not playing for money, I'm going home. If we're not playing for money. So the Humphreys family, Susan's father and mother, Dad was a gambler, penny ante stuff, but they have poker games on Friday night, and Billy went over there one time. Susan was 16. Billy was 19. He was known as country, but he looked like he was 35. He just was like, Susan was like, first time I saw him, I thought he was like my old as my dad, because he was just beat up. But Susan got married and eventually divorced. Billy was divorced. They met up. First time they ever really went someplace together. Naturally, it was on a junket to Vegas. Billy gets drunk on the plane and, doesn't even wait for the people on the plane to get on the bus to take him to the Riviera. He gets in a cab, and now he's taking Susan out there. They're sleeping in separate rooms because Susan said, I can't do this in front of I want to be the right thing in front of my parents' friends and things. By the time she gets to the hotel, Billy is passed out at the blackjack table. And Susan, to her ever-loving credit, just goes, well, okay. I'll go out with my friends and, I'll spend the weekend. And Billy was like, normally a woman would be, okay, I'm done with you. But that wasn't Susan. She saw something in Bill. She saw that fire. She saw that drive. She saw that ability to hit rock bottom and find your way to the top. Not once, not twice, but, Billy's probably been broke 100 times in his life.
Yeah.
Including, you mentioned that $1 million, Dave. He comes home one night, and Susan goes, how did you do? Oh, well, I lost $1 million and then another $150,000 in credit. And I've been married to the same woman for 43 years. If I came home and said anything remote, oh yeah, honey, I just lost 10,000, right? I would be sleeping in the garage.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Susan just goes, well, that's okay. We'll make it back. We'll make it back. And I'll tell you something too, is it's not as prevalent as it, but you see moments of it. Susan was a partner with Billy when Billy was betting and had his operation. When they were going through those slips at the end of the night and they're making sure that everything lines up to the penny, it wasn't just Bill Walters. It was Susan Walters right there next to him. Yep. And when they were betting, big games, and they would be in Chip Reese living room, and they'd have bowls on their head, pretending they were on the defensive line for a goal line stand. Susan was right there with Billy. And she's become really good friends with my wife. And my wife is a really good judge of character, and she loves Susan. And I think Susan has a great heart, and a lot of what Bill's philanthropy is because Susan is right there next to him the whole time, believing in it and contributing to it. So I think that's one of the great blessings of Bill's life. And it's interesting because I think, Dave, as the book was evolving and people were reading it, people that I respect and getting a first look at it, one of the first things they said was, I need to know more about Susan. I need to know more about Billy's relationship with Susan. We don't want to make her a wooden character, in this book. And so I spent a lot of time on the phone with Susan and in person with Susan, just building out the relationship and building out the scenes, and building out her feelings about, what it was like for her when Billy was in prison.
Yeah.
She made hundreds of trips. Every weekend she was in Louisville. She had to fly through Atlanta to Pensacola. The gates would open up at like 5:00 on Friday for visiting hours. Susan would be there every single time, no less than 2 hours before the gates opened. They'd opened at 8:00 in the morning on Saturday. Susan would be there at 5:30 at 6, so she could be the first in line to get to the vending machine so she could get Bill the food that he wanted to eat because he couldn't eat out of the commissary. So all these not so little things that she did because she loves Bill and she believes in Bill. I think that love story, that part of the book it's very appealing to people on a different level.
Well, one thing a lot of sports bettors have been waiting for is the fact that Billy revealed his system for sports betting. I think those two chapters will be the most highlighted and written on pages of your book for a lot of sports bettors. Why did Billy think now was the right time to reveal his secrets of sports betting?
Well, that's a good question. he's 77 years old. You know, he's not getting any younger. We've talked about, you know, the next 10 years of Bill's life. He feels like I'm really going to enjoy my life. You know, I think he'll tone down certainly the betting to a dull roar at this point in time. But he's never, you know, he's turned down tens of millions of dollars over the years to reveal his secrets. And I think because sports gambling is legal now, he sees what's going on with FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, you name them, where the odds are really stacked against the recreational bettor, the average bettor, a first-time bettor getting in and trying to understand the system. You know, we spent a lot of time coming up with sort of the betting tips, but also backing those tips with really hardcore data. I mean, I was blown away by the amount of information that Billy has at his fingertips from not only his brain trust, but what is it now? I think they had the NFL games back to 1974, every season back to 1974. But just things, and I'm looking at it right here, Dave. I mean, shop around, set up multiple accounts.
Yeah.
So you can compare spreads and prices, favorites early, underdogs late, injuries, how important they are to a game outcome. You know, every player in the league on Billy's system has a point total, a value associated with that player. So whether it's Tom Brady in his time or Joey Bosa now or Dak Prescott or somebody like that, learn the value and how to buy half a point. Half a points are critical. The value of numbers, the value of the number 3, 7, 10, 14, 17, but really the value of the number 3. You know, 8% of the games back to the 1970s, the winning team is won by 3 points. I mean, it's far and away the most, as you know, the most valuable number in professional football. Parlays and teasers, fun bets, but just a terrible place to try to make any money. 30% profit by the books compared to 5% on other bets. Money management system, discipline. You know, I've got family members who, you know, have the apps on their phone, and I've become the preacher who just says, you know, you have to figure out how much money you want to lose. Yes, you're going to have some big wins. God bless you. You want to parlay. But over time, you have to treat it as, unless you're doing what Billy Walters are doing, a lot of the sharps are doing, the people who listen to your program are doing, they spend an inordinate amount of time trying to get the right number, value.
Yeah.
You know, that was Billy's biggest thing, the value of a number. And if you're not doing that and you're just enjoying it, then you should, and here I'm going to get on the soapbox, but you have to realize how much money you want to lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really, I'm a little more, having spent so much time in this world the last 3 years and having done a number of sports gambling stories, now dating back into the 80s as we started the conversation, I think there's a reckoning coming, and I think it's going to be very, very difficult on marriages and on certain people's bank accounts. And I'm not saying something that hasn't happened for people who spend a lot of time in casinos. So, but now with, what is it now, 38, 40 states where it's legal?
Yeah.
You know, I think August, I just saw the August numbers in New York. More than $1 billion was bet in New York. Pretty close to it in New Jersey. Nevada, I think, was third with almost 500 million. But there's hundreds of billions of dollars are going to be bet this year legally in the United States on sports. And to think that's not going to have an impact on society down the line, I think you're, you know, whistling in the wind. So, and I think that's where your audience, you know, irregardless of the stories of Billy Walters' life, I think those 2 chapters are worth every penny of whatever the book costs on Amazon these days, $21. For $21, if you can get all of Billy Walters' secrets on, and I mean all of them, sports gambling, that's a pretty good investment as far as I can see.
As I said, it's an incredible book if you like stories of the who's who in Las Vegas, the ins and outs of sports betting. And I guarantee you will never look at a roulette wheel the same way after you read the story about Billy Walters and Steve Witt. Who the hell thinks of this? It's amazing. Only Billy can think of that. But I have to ask you, what you alluded to. I mean, a lot of young people are getting into sports betting now. A lot of them see sports betting as a way to make a lot of money really quick. How should they view the story of Billy Walters? Is it a success story? Is it a cautionary tale? Is it a rising from the ashes kind of story? Is it all of the above? What would you say about the life of Billy Walters?
All of the above, but that's a very good question. I think it's all of the above, but in the end, I think it's a cautionary tale because unless you're willing to put in the time and the money, and I think more the time than the money, but Billy would spend millions of dollars every year with his brain trust, getting the numbers and getting a system. And that system would change every year based upon a certain set of parameters that were, they would look and they would go. I mean, I think they did hundreds and hundreds of, what's the word I'm looking for? They would go through and look at things hundreds of times to see if they had done something different. So unless you're willing to devote your life to something like that, I think sports gambling, the way it is now, I've been out at Circa. I've been at the South Point because I'm working on something that has to do with sports betting now with those two casinos. And I think it's fantastic at times to be there during the Final Four or the Super Bowl and the customer service and all that stuff, and you can have a great time. But you have to realize that this is a form of entertainment. And just like going to dinner or going to the movies or going to vacation, the smart play is to realize that that's a finite amount of money that you're spending. And when that bell rings and that's the end of your bankroll, the last thing you want to do, I think, is to say, okay, I'll put it on a credit card or I'll borrow from Peter to pay off or to bet some more. I think, to me, that's what, and Billy's pretty clear about that in the book, the discipline. And I think that's what the young introductory or recreational gamblers have to understand, that this is not, you're not going to get rich doing this. Not the way the odds are, 52.38 just to break even. Then there's taxes, and then there's everything else. I mean, you have to win 55% of the time to make any kind of money. And I just don't, nobody, very, very, very few people, one half of 1%, are real. And your world better than I do. A lot of people say they're making money, but there's a lot of people talking out of both sides of their mouth too. So I think in this case, understand what it is you're getting into, enjoy yourself, but show some discipline. When don't chase losses on Monday night. That you've had a bad weekend. Take the bullet and prepare for the next weekend. So, there's a lot of that, and I think if you look at what Billy's been through in his life and the enormous amount of time and effort that he's put into it, there's very, very, very few people that are anywhere near the Billy Walters of the world. 36 straight years with a winning record. I mean, there's a reason that he has that record, and it's not luck. Trust me.
The name of the book is Gambler, Secrets from a Life at Risk, written in collaboration with Armen Keteyian. Armen, thank you so much for joining us and telling us all about this incredible book. It's an amazing story, and I urge everyone to pick up a copy. Thanks so much for coming on and telling us about it.
Oh, Dave, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on The Turnpike.